Some say that in the world's most distant depths lies a crystal fortress. Protected by dreamlike beings, its core contains a treasure, with a power that defies all time and logic. I think we can say quite confidently that this has been the most challenging generation when it comes to solving its mysteries. Paradoxes, crystals, time travels, dreams, an amalgam of elements that the more you dig into, the less you seem to understand. But the journey has come to an end, and as I have promised, today I'll try to organize my thoughts in this ultimate video about what I think this unforgettable story was meant to tell us. What are the Paradox Pokemon? That's a good starting point to try to find something clear in all this mess. Their sudden appearance in the Pokemon world seems to be related to the rest of this generation's mysteries. You must already know the theory that I've been defending from the beginning. There's no way they are merely past and future versions of Pokemon of the present, no matter how much the game might try to make you believe that at first glance. Their cliché and literal designs far away from Game Freak's way of creating Pokemon, the deceased professors being obsessed with the creation of a reality that exists only in their heads, the power of crystals to make even the impossible come true. All these facts are clues that seem to point in one direction, that the same creator force behind the crystals, which can make its own reality, created these unreal beings. But things are not always as they seem. Or that was the lesson we were able to learn with the release of the first DLC in Kitakami, a land where, for generations, a trio of Pokemon has been honored because, according to the legends of the region, they saved the villagers from a terrible ogre at the cost of their own lives. A Pokemon adaptation of the tale of Momotaro, perhaps Japan's most famous folktale. However, playing with the expectations of Kitakami's residents and even the player, the reality was just the opposite. The story was completely twisted, and the idolized Loyal 3 ended up being greedy Pokemon who attacked the ogre and its friend to get their masks, intending to wreak havoc with them. Their names, Munkidori, Okidogi, and Fezandipiti, also come from expressions that are meant to say that everything is fine, playing once again with their role in the first DLC. But while there was actually no direct reference to it, there were hints scattered here and there, pointing to the fact that a key piece of the puzzle was missing. A mysterious figure that kept appearing, with a peach shape and the same color as the chains of these three thugs, was finally exposed as the one guilty of poisoning their minds to do evil. It all went south when a model of the Pokemon in the game files was leaked. If we add to that the weird change in Kieran's behavior during the story, and his new look in the last trailer before this second DLC, appropriately resembling that mysterious being, you have the perfect breeding ground for the community to come up with theories predicting the most plausible scenario. According to all the rumors, this character's mind, like the Loyal 3 of the legend, had been poisoned by this mysterious puppeteer, turning him into a threat without precedent that we would have to stop in these DLCs. But instead of that story, told several times over in the series by the way, we found a far more human tale. Kieran, even with all his changes and dark feelings, is far from the possessed psychopath everyone expected to see. It's actually quite the opposite. His change in development is 100% in response to events that we are able to see with our own eyes. After a whole life of standing up for the ogre and being totally ignored, he sees you resolve the problem without any apparent effort, achieving everything he wanted, and to top it off, you get to keep his beloved Pokemon. He concludes that only if he becomes stronger than you will life be fair to him, and his metamorphosis responds to this blind search for power at all costs. Everything is so paradoxical in this generation that it even has an impact on details such as teams. Kieran replaces his entire team with competitive Pokemon except for Hydrapple, who has been around since he innocently caught it in the apple orchards of the region, and it has a Terra type that is far from the best for it, showing that at least for a moment he ignored that unhealthy need for perfection. This Pokemon represents the forbidden fruit and how the character is allured by darkness, but at the same time, and paradoxically, that he's still the same as always. His battle theme is desperately aggressive, almost as if he was in a hurry to show his strength, but it also has some hopeful passages with his original melody. Because things are not always as they seem. That's the core idea on which the story is built, and it just keeps popping up. We thought we would find a literal transcription of the tale of Momotaro, but instead we learned about a sad story that completely put everything upside down. When we thought we were clever enough to predict a character being controlled by a new Pokemon, we were suddenly hit with a human drama that the game had actually shown us directly, but we weren't paying attention since we were too busy looking for clues of a presumed hidden plot. In hindsight, Blueberry Academy is located in Unova, the same place where the 5th gen addressed issues that have a lot to do with that message. We see characters doing evil without breaking laws, and others genuinely striving to do good but causing enormous amounts of pain all around them. The message of the teal mask resonates and complements with Pokemon Black and White, so using this dreamy place as a nexus between Kitakami and Unova is a spark of genius, like so many others hidden in the chaos of this generation. Going even further, I suspect that the blatant number of references to Unova will be the ultimate manifestation of how expectations about the next games will be broken, and the future releases in the series will have absolutely nothing to do with the 5th gen. I'll do anything to protect it from being slaughtered with chibi balloon heads. But of course, this way of messing with the player's expectation is not something that has suddenly appeared with the DLC. In fact, it has been a constant and central theme of the adventure from the very beginning. Team Star were assumed to be bullies, but they were actually students who had been abused and decided to stand up against it, resulting in an academy free of bullying. The professor is initially introduced to you as just a regular one, but soon you begin to notice dark and strange signs that foreshadow ominous intentions, all to discover that the real professors have been dead for years, and the one you've been talking to is an entity with their intelligence who is trying to fix the mistakes of the original by heroically going against their own nature. Over and over, these games make you suspect something only for it to end up being the complete opposite. And of course, Terapagos, Area Zero, and going back to the beginning, the Paradox Pokemon, are the ultimate manifestation of this way of playing with expectations. At first glance, they are simply past and future versions of Pokemon from the present, which is nothing new in a series where fossils and time travel already existed. But any reasonably observant person would soon realize that it doesn't make sense for them to actually be that. They are all different kinds of animals, with contradictory aspects that make it impossible for them to exist, and most of all, as we mentioned at the beginning, predictable, cliché, and very far from Game Freak's way of designing Pokemon. On a second level, some of us went a little further, and took the risk of proposing theories that tried to explain their existence. This led to the development of two main lines of reasoning. The imagination hypothesis that we have been theorizing on this channel tells that the Paradox are not from another time, being what the game calls a time machine, some kind of process by which, based on all those cliches and archetypical ideas of past and future Pokemon, these beings materialize, using the same power of the crystals to do the impossible that the game constantly pushes in our faces. Many clues in the game outside of the Paradox themselves seem to fuel this theory, such as the constant references to literary and science fiction classics, and of course, the very aesthetics of the whole thing. Terapagos, Area Zero, even the Academy, everything gives off a halo of dreaminess that leads you to think that the power of dreams is somehow involved in all of this. The other line of reasoning opts for a more scientific path, with a focus on reason to dismiss the realm of dreams. The Paradox Pokemon would indeed appear from a time machine, but not a normal one as it may seem on the surface, but one capable of traveling between timelines. According to the multiverse theories, every time someone makes a decision, infinite timelines are created with what would have happened in every conceivable scenario. This creates an endless web of realities in which, no matter how far-fetched and contradictory the situation you imagine, there is some universe where it is real. This would put an end to the entire debate about the inconsistencies of these forms in one stroke. No matter how irrational any of these Pokemon are, there is always a universe in which things happen so that such a life form exists, just as there is a universe for anything you can think of. If the time machine can travel between these timelines at will, then these logic limits simply don't apply. A point that I don't think anyone has talked about to support this idea is the presence of the new convergent species. Just as Paradox forms looks very similar to Pokemon from our world, but actually have nothing to do with them, and God knows what events in their universes made them look like that, Convergent Species looks quite like other known Pokemon, but have no direct relation with them, having developed in a similar way due to having received equivalent evolutionary stimulation. A very, very close idea that precisely was introduced in the same generation. Is it possible that this is some kind of clue from the game to understand these beings a little bit more? So without further ado, has my opinion of these Pokemon changed? Which theory will I end up choosing? Well, both and none. Sounds paradoxical? The post-game presence of the professors is very clarifying in that aspect. They say in their own words that they are investigating Pokemon from parallel timelines, which for many has completely dismissed the imagination theory and confirmed the opposite. But if you've made it this far in the video, you've surely understood the message of these games. Nothing is as it seems at first sight. One quote from the professors is for me definitive about what they really wanted to tell us. They do mention timelines, but also confirm how the Violet and Scarlet book capturing their imagination was the reason to start all their research. As we have already seen, the game keeps showing us situations, places, dialogues, and scenes that are more reminiscent of a dreamlike world than of a presumed time travel story. Even the actual event of meeting the professors is surrounded by a oniric mist and a strange atmosphere. And then, everything suddenly ends precisely with a mysterious different title screen at dawn, and we appearing in our bed in the academy. Does this mean that I am claiming that it was all a dream and that the time travel theory has been dismissed? Well, that's not the case either. The material presence of the book that this character trades us creates dozens of contradictions and temporal paradoxes, and the professor's notes at the Area Zero underdepths confirming this paradox are there. But it could also be seen the other way around. Perhaps reading those notes sparked in the player a wish to know more, and Terapagos materialized that on the spot. My point is that the game is intentionally ambiguous with that dreams versus timelines argument, so in my opinion, both are true at the same time. That's the real paradox of the Paradox Pokemon. The professor is indeed someone who insanely idealized the past and future. Just look at the way they dressed. Nothing is a coincidence. This person would imagine a multitude of Pokemon that could fit into their idea of a world that would bring back the magic of another era, where they could live happily with their family. This was just a fantasy, a fleeting dream. But when they started to study the great crater of Paldea and the crystals, everything would definitely be changed. With the study of the events described in the Scarlet and Violet book and the discovery of the Area Zero crystals, Sada and Turo were able to understand the truth behind the whole thing. The temporal paradox in which the events of the story are trapped, and the power of Terapagos to manipulate timelines as if they were a mere dream. So they would use its power to summon Pokemon from other timelines that mirrored the beings they dreamed of. After all, is there really any difference between dreaming and witnessing realities that go beyond those dreams? Can't the reality of one universe be the dream of another? A story that, as long as the crystals exist, will repeat itself eternally. And you, paradoxically, will always be at its core.